In our first video, we talked about one basic difference between liberals and conservatives, and that was the role that each of those groups believed that the government should take with regard to the major issues of the day. Well, someone on YouTube asked this question, quote, "Are the poor responsible for their poverty?" Close quote. This question gives us an opportunity to discuss a little bit more about the differences between liberals and conservatives. In our second video, while talking about the proper role of government, we touched briefly on the subject of the poor when we were talking about the moral responsibility for people to care for the truly needy. Now let's talk a little bit more about the poor today, and let's be specific about what we're talking about. We're not talking about the truly needy, or those who, because of mental or physical limitations, are not capable of taking care of themselves. We're talking about the poor who are capable of taking care of themselves. So, first of all, why would somebody ask this question in the first place? Are the poor responsible for their poverty? Well, liberals teach that the poor are victims of the rich, and that the wealthy only got that way by taking advantage of the poor. Or to put it in the words of Ronald Reagan, quote, "We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing next to a thin man without coming to the conclusion that the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one." Close quote. This is the liberal idea that economic growth is a zero-sum game, or if I get more wealthy, someone else must be getting more poor. Conservatives, on the other hand, recognize that economic growth is not a zero-sum game. And notice I said they recognize and not believe, because economic data does not support the idea that the rich get richer at the expense of the poor. In my state, J.R. Simplot became a billionaire. He started out as a farmer, got into a lot of other businesses, and throughout his lifetime created tens of thousands of jobs. And at one point he got into an electronics business by being the major funding partner for somebody else's idea for a business, and started a company that then went on to become one of the largest memory companies in the world. And again, creating tens of thousands of jobs in a completely different industry than from where he gained his initial wealth. Now, however I twist it, I can't see any way that JR's wealth hurt the poor. But quite on the contrary, because of his efforts, all the wealth that was created, the many, many jobs, the economic growth that improved the lives of a great number of people. And through all of his ventures, he was not the only one that became wealthy. There were very many other people who became very well off as a result, and it spawned many more ventures and opportunities. So, are the poor responsible for their poverty? Well, yes. Who else can be responsible for it? And this is another fundamental difference between liberals and conservatives. Because liberals, again, teach that the poor are victims, and that we should redistribute wealth from the wealthy, because after all, they only got it by taking advantage of the poor in the first place. Conservatives, on the other hand, show that when given liberty, the poor do not have to stay that way. J.R. Simplot started out very poor. He dropped out of school and left home when he was just 14 years old. He went to work for a farmer. Not really the typical blueprint that you would use for someone to become a billionaire. But because he was free to work hard until he found success, that's exactly what he did. Only in a free society can the poor move upward. If we eliminate the free society, we eliminate the ability of the poor to improve their situation. One final point to consider. President Lyndon Johnson, about 46 years ago, started what he called the War on Poverty. And since then, we have spent nearly $17 trillion on welfare programs. And the result? The poverty is winning. The poverty rates are higher now than they were in the 70s. And we've succeeded in keeping the poor poor. So we have two ideas. The liberal idea that the poor are victims and need to be given handouts through the redistribution of wealth. Or we have the conservative idea that the poor and everyone else should be given liberty and the opportunity to improve their own situation in life. Where do you stand?